Ollie here, and this is my review of Planet of the Spiders, the fifth and final story of the 11th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Jon Pertwee in his final regular outing as the Third Doctor. Planet of the Spiders is the 74th story overall. It's 6 parts long and is written by Robert Sloman. So the plot of Planet of the Spiders is as follows. At a Tibetan retreat in the English countryside, a group of men are using ancient meditation rituals to tap into a mysterious alien power. They unwittingly create a bridgehead between Earth and Metebelis 3, a planet where two legs are oppressed by giant spiders. The creatures are desperate to recover the blue jewel that the Doctor gave to Jo Grant as a wedding gift. Now, the Doctor must risk everything to it and return to Metebelis 3 to face the awesome power of the Great One, who plans to use the crystal to enslave all of humankind. The spiders. I adored this story. Of all 24 stories in the Jon Pertwee era, I would actually name Planet of the Spiders as my favourite Pertwee story ever. It's amazing, has a lot of incredible moments, iconic enemies in the eight legs, incredible direction to top it off, and amazing regeneration with a very decent backstory to it. And I would say that without a doubt, that Planet of the Spiders is probably my favourite regeneration story in the entirety of Doctor Who. The production of the story was fantastic. I love the bits and pieces that actually contributed to the story, like the Metebelis free sets, for instance, where all the villagers lived. They looked lovely, and the backdrop of Metebelis free. Yes, it was in front of a CSO screen, but I liked it. It's still pretty good. And I also like the spiders domain where the the Great One resided, and then I liked how it was pretty much almost the same backdrop as it was in the Green Death, and that was nicer to world building that Metebelis 3 had. And I actually like the visuals of this story, especially the cheesy electric strikes from Lupton's men, controlled by the spiders were. It was very funny, and it was very memorable to me, for example, where it actually cheesy, yes, but adds charm to the story. Plus, the chase sequence in part 2 when the Doctor, Sarah Jane, and Una were chasing after Lupton. Yes, it did eat up the part of a lot of episode part 2, but I still enjoyed it. I think this is probably one of my favorite scenes of the Pertwee era overall. And I also like the simple regeneration transition between the third Doctor and into the fourth Doctor. The spiders themselves looked fantastic. Giant basic spiders, yes, but they definitely looked creepy, and it was very effective, especially for those that have like arachnophobia, for instance. And obviously, I like the music in this story. It was very entertaining. It definitely added to the suspense of this story. So, well done. Great. The direction by Barry Letts was incredible, and I actually do believe that Planet of the Spiders is the best story that Barry Letts has directed for Doctor Who. He was actually responsible for adding the chase sequence in part 2, which I really enjoyed, as I mentioned before, and I'll get more onto the chase scene later on in this review. The plot is very well done, and I liked how the story actually showed the consequences of the Doctor stealing the Metebelis free crystal back in the Green Death last season, and it actually adds to the third Doctor's character development at the end, which caused him to regenerate because he was exposed to the Metebelis so he was exposed to the radiation that was caused to the Metebelis free crystals. And I also like the Buddhist elements of the story, such as the jewel and the lotus mantra that was used on Mani Padme Hum, and that was using a Abominable Snowman, I think. It added to that cultural element to it. It was very, very well done, and I think Barry Letts himself was a practicing Buddhist, and he actually got complaints from actual Buddhists, saying that they didn't like um how the religion was used to attract evil. I actually thought that was pretty funny, but I think Barry Letts insisted that it wasn't intended to be like that at all. I also like the reincarnation story that this message had. Aside from the Doctor regenerating, it actually does address this theme, such as Campo Rinpoche becoming Shoji, and Campo, who has Choji's face, showing up to tell the Doctor, Sarah Jane, and the Brigadier that the Doctor was about to regenerate. So the main message of this story was that the Doctor must destroy his current self and his ego to become a new man, and so he can like save the world and all that. So it was a pretty cool concept, and it's very well thought of as well. On the topic of regeneration, this is the first time that regeneration is explicitly mentioned, and for the first time compared to the last two regeneration stories where it was referred to as renewal or changing your appearance. And I actually do find that a bit funny because Terrence Dicks co-wrote, and at the time he was still the script editor of the War Games, and they featured the second Doctor to regenerate, but it wasn't actually referred to as regeneration back then. It was just you're gonna have to change your appearance. So, but hey, at least we now know what regeneration is, and it's actually used in future Doctor Who stories, and not just the Doctor regenerating. We do have other Time Lords such as Campo Rinpoche regenerating as well. So, hey, at least we'll be getting new names in the near future, innit? The Spiders actually definitely has some incredible moments, and those moments are what made me fall in love with this story. Especially the chase scene in part 2. Yes, it did eat up a lot of the story time. I agree with that. But this scene is pretty much sums up the Jon Pertwee era overall, especially with Unit, Sarah Jane, and the Doctor going off to Lupton on an array of vehicles such as mini helicopters, Bessie, and the Humobile, which was actually introduced in Invasion of the Dinosaurs. And then it also gave us a very good cliffhanger when the Doctor actually finally reaches Lupton and Lupton just vanishes like that. But it was actually explained in in part 3 when I think it was one of the Eightlers actually transported Lupton back to the meditation center. Other scenes I liked was when the Doctor arrived into Metropolis 3 to save Sarah Jane when he was actually fighting some of the Great One's guard, and it led to another amazing cliffhanger when one of the guards just attacked the Doctor within the lightning with the electric bolts. I also like the episode 4 cliffhanger when the Doctor showed up seemingly to rescue Sarah Jane, but then it turned out he was captured as well. Elizabeth Sladen really sold the humor of that scene, and I actually was just dying of laughter when the cliffhanger happened. It was a pretty, I think it's probably one of the rare instances where I actually get a funny cliffhanger. I also like the scene where the Doctor confronted the Great One. And I liked how the Great One lured in the Doctor to pretending to be Sarah Jane and like explaining her ambition for world domination and how she took back the crystal from the Doctor, which is what actually defeats her. And the other spiders to an extent killing the third Doctor as well. I also like the scene when Tommy was where he was exposed to the Metebelis free crystal and it cures his childlike mentality and he pretty much grows up thanks to the crystal, and it was a nice heartwarming thing as well, and it shows how quickly he was reading books, and because he wasn't able to read properly before, he was just reading them with precision, and he did it very well, and I liked how he was able to defend himself against Lupton's men at the end of part 5, leading into part 6, because I think it was mentioned that his innocence was actually protecting him from the spider's attacks. And that was another great scene. And I think another scene I liked was when Sarah Jane found the Doctor 3 weeks later when he returned to unit and decides and pretty much regenerates. And that was a very emotional scene. I think Elizabeth Sladen and Jon Pertwee and Nicholas Courtney really performed that scene very well, to be honest, and that was pretty cool. The actor, which I would say is definitely fantastic and the best of this season, Jon Pertwee delivers an Oscar-worthy performance in his final story, and I would definitely say that this is, without a doubt, one of his best performances as the Third Doctor. He got some incredible scenes, such as the chase scene, the scene where he confronts the Great One, and I also like the scene where what he needed to do to defeat the Great One, which is pretty much sacrifice himself to defeat the Great One and the rest of the Eight Legs on Metebelis 3. And as I mentioned before, I really liked his regeneration scene. I mean, it was pretty much almost said the same words as he said to Sarah Jane back in the Monster of Peridon when the Sonic Lance self-destructed and he was like, tears. And then another scene when Sarah Jane was like to the Doctor, when there's life, and there's obviously Ultron walked in. So that was another nice scene. He also gets an amazing regeneration sequence, and the reason for his regeneration, as I mentioned before, and I'm gonna go into more depth here, he was exposed to the radiation that was emitted from the Metebelis crystals that also killed the Great One, so the Doctor pretty much knew what he was getting into, so he can defeat the Great One, which is pretty much the loss of his own life, and obviously him regenerating to another person. Elizabeth Sladen was great as Sarah Jane. I would definitely say that Planet of the Spiders is one of her best performances, and she actually does get a lot to do, especially in part 1, where she actually works away from the Doctor in unit when she goes over to see Mike Kate in the meditation center, who we haven't even seen since the abysmal invasion of the dinosaurs, to help investigate that center and the myriad of going on and stuff like that. I also like the scene when the Queen Spider takes over Sarah Jane and she tries to attack Campo Rinpoche, but Campo realizes that something is wrong and Sarah Jane's not actually herself, and he pretty much removes that influence that the Queen Spider had on Sarah Jane. It was another well acted scene as well, and Elizabeth Sladen was actually definitely afraid of spiders, so I think that fear definitely made that scene very effective. And as I mentioned before, I like the scene where the Doctor returns 3 weeks later and Sarah is visibly distraught over the Doctor dying, but Campo in the astral projection form assures her and the Brigadier the Doctor will be fine. He's just going to regenerate. So this is a unit family story, one of their final unit family stories. They don't really play a big part in the story as they did in Invasion of the Dinosaurs and the Green Death, but they were still very good. Nicholas Courtney was great as the Brigadier. He didn't have much to do when the Doctor goes off to Metebelis free. He wasn't even featured a whole lot afterwards. And there was a scene at the beginning of this story where he and the Doctor go to a belly dancing show, and the dancer was doing something impressive, and the Brigadier was like, I might have to adapt these exercises for some of the men. That was a a very hilarious line. I also like the line when Professor Clegg was showing off his clairvoyancy, or I think that's what it was. I think that's what it's called. Or then we were using a gift, so we're using a watch that the Brigadier had, and he noticed that the watch was given to him by a young woman named Doris to show her gratitude for their night together. Obviously, something must have happened there, but we actually do find out that in Battlefield, which is in the final season of Classic Who, that was actually his wife. Benton was alright. He doesn't do a great deal in the story other than being attacked by Lupton in part 2, and I think he gets a promotion in the following story, so yeah. Mike Yates returns after his quiet resignation from UNIT and has found himself recovering in the Buddhist meditation center. And he actually does a lot for this story, and I really like that. This is basically it's Yates' redemption arc, but I didn't like how it was addressed because of the lack of mentions of what he did in the Invasion of the Dinosaurs. So it would have been nice to have at least featured some tension between Yates, the Doctor, and the Brigadier because of what he did, and it pretty much makes that storyline useless because they never really got mentioned at all. So this is also the last time ever we'll see Captain Mike Yates in Doctor Who. So he was a great character. So I wish he did come out for other stories, but I understand why he didn't. I don't know why, but maybe his contract expired. He didn't want to renew it, but he definitely does do a great job in this episode. And Richard Franklin definitely played Mike Yates very well, so hats off to him and congratulations for that. On to our side cast. There are a lot of great side characters and it all made the story very enjoyable, to say the least. So to start off, the characters we had was Campo Rinpoche slash Choji. Campo was a Time Lord living as a Buddhist abbot in the meditation center, and it was actually revealed that Campo was the same hermit that the Doctor was telling Joe Grant about in the Time Monster. So Campo pretty much actually projected himself as Choji whenever needed, and in the end, Campo regenerated into Choji, and then when the Doctor was about to regenerate, Campo slash Choji showed up in an astral projection form and was pretty much assuring the Brigadier and Sayojin that the Doctor's going to regenerate and everything's going to be okay. He may be a little erratic at times, but he'll get over it. So, and I like how he was an interesting character, and I like that how he was featured in this story by pretty much linking the Time Monster and this story together. So that was pretty impressive. We had Tommy. He was the handyman of the meditation center and pretty much had the mind of a child, and it isn't explained why he has that. He befriends Sarah Jane and Mike Yates, and I think Sarah Jane gives him a necklace, and I think to an extent, I think he even had the Metebelis crystal, which actually cures him, and which was able to he was able to defend himself against Lobton's men's attacks in part 5/part 6 because, as I mentioned before, his innocence was pretty much protecting him from the spider's attacks. He was a very good character and definitely one of my favorite side characters of this season. We have Professor Clegg. He was an entertainer and he displayed aid mental powers such as telekinesis and mind reading. He also reads a letter Joe sent to UNIT, which also contained the Metebelis free crystal because Joe sent it as it was people that she was talking to, I think in the Amazon, that they were saying it was very dangerous, has some very bad magic, and it will cause harm to them. So that's how the story kicks off. And he also comes into contact with the crystal and he sees giant spiders all over it, and he later dies of a heart attack caused by fright. He is played by Cyril Shaps, and pretty much every story that this man has been in, his character ends up dying. I mean, he dies in Tomb of the Cybermen, he dies in Ambassadors of Death, and he dies here, so now he's pretty much the Sean Bean of side characters of Doctor Who. He also had Lupton's men. They were Barnes, Land, Kiefer, and Moss. Nothing there aren't really that much. They don't really get any development. We all know that they live in a meditation center, and they're all in Lobson's circle, and then the eight legs of Metabolus took over all of them, and when that link was broken, they all ended up having nervous breakdowns, and they all rushed to hospital. So now on to the people that lived in Metabolus 3. Arak, son of Saber and Nesca, and Eight Legs was after him because when he attacked one of her guards, they were after him. So Saber, his dad, pretty much took his place. He was an interesting character, and I think he often clashed with his brother Tua. Saber, father of Arak and Rhaegar, he offered himself as a hostage when Arak attacked the Eight-Legs guards. He seemed rather content in his hostage situation and was telling the Doctor and Sarah Jane to pretty much do the same. He was another interesting character, and I think because of him being content in his hostage situation, and then he was obviously rescued by his children at the end of the story. Tua, Saber and Nesca's son, obviously the brother of Arak and Rhaegar, he found Sarah and he assumed that she was a spy sent by the Eight Legs, and he and Arak later saved Saber when they attacked the Spider's Palace. Nesca, wife of Saber, mother of Arak, Rhaegar, and Tua, and Rhaegar, the daughter of Saber and Nesca, and she was enslaved by the Eight Legs. So those are our side characters of Planet of the Spiders, and they were lovely. On to the enemies of the story. We had the Eight Legs, the Queen Spider, the Great One, and Lupton. So let's start off with Lupton. He was a successful salesman who lost his job as a result of a takeover for the firm that he worked at, and he was pretty much looking for revenge because he just lost everything. And he lived in a meditation center, and he was working on his meditation skills, and he came into contact with one of the Eight Legs of Metabolus, and the two worked together to retrieve the crystal, and he became complacent and started insulting the Eight Legs by pretty much calling them spiders, which was a derogatory term for the Eight Legs. He was killed by the eight leg that hired him when his usefulness had ended. Lobson was a fantastic villain, and I liked his character very much. I think he's definitely one of my favorite villains aside from the Master and all that in the Jon Pertwee era. We also had the Eight Legs. They were giant spiders that had psychic powers and could communicate telepathically. They were all very deadly, and I would say that the Eight Legs are definitely my favorite enemies of the Jon Pertwee era. I love their mantra of all praise to the Great One. Fun fact, one of them was voiced by Yisan Churchman, who provides the voice of Alpha Centauri. The Queen Spider was the leader of the Eight Legs and also served the Great One. She took over Sarah Jane so she can get back the crystal, but Sarah Jane was freed by Camper Rinpoche and later went back to Metabolus 3. I think she later appeared as the villain in one of the Fourth Doctor novels, which I think that was released in the 90s. So I don't know much about that, but I read more of when the Doctor is able to defeat her, personally. She was voiced by Kismet Delgado, and as you can tell by her surname, she was married to Roger Delgado. And finally, we have the Great One, the literal big bad of the story. She wanted to rule the universe and needed the crystal that the Doctor stole. She was very powerful, and then she was able to read the Doctor's mind and took the crystal from him. Her demise came from her retrieving the crystal, but as there was no way to store the knowledge that she gained from the crystal, thus the crystal started emitting very dangerous and lethal radiation, which ended up killing her and also killed the Doctor as well. She was a great villain, and I liked how she appeared mainly in the last scenes of the story, setting up the final showdown between her and the Doctor. The only criticism I have was the lack of mention of Yates betraying Unit and erasing the dinosaurs. Yes, he was given the chance to resign and move on, but it would have been understandable to have at least some tension between him, the Doctor, and the Brigadier. With that being said, I really shouldn't have eaten at least most of the episode's plot, but it would have been nice to have a little bit of conversation between the three, explaining his actions and then him apologizing, saying what he did was wrong, what he realized, and how the meditation center helped him realize that what he did was bad. And yeah, but it seemed a bit weird how the Doctor and Brigadier were just able to quickly forgive him and nothing else was really mentioned. So yeah. Good. The Planet of the Spiders is a very fitting end to the Jon Pertwee era, filled with epic moments and a plot that ended up building the Doctor's character, and at the same time it fulfilled the Third Doctor's story arc. Plus, it also saved season 11 from being a total disaster. I'm proud to call Planet of the Spiders my favorite Jon Pertwee story ever, and With that being said, Planet of the Spiders is a perfect 10 out of 10. So that's it for our space dandy Jon Pertwee. We see him again in the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who, The Five Doctors, and the 30th anniversary special, which also served as a crossover with EastEnders, Dimensions in Time, and if it's canon or not is up for debate, but I don't really think it is. So as I did with William Hartnell for the 10th Planet and Patrick Troughton for the War Games, I want to share my thoughts and the brief analysis of the Jon Pertwee era and why I fucking love his era so much. Jon Pertwee was a fantastic Doctor. He was definitely a right pick for the Doctor. Despite him being a comedy actor, Pertwee was able to prove that he was able to play the Doctor to perfection, and him being the first Doctor to have his era air completely in colour, aside from a few technical issues which still stand today because some of the color episodes were wiped and the black and white episodes were pretty much still left in the archives, but we can still enjoy his era in color because the color has been restored. Hooray! And that makes his era very special. The early part of his era pretty much consisted with the Doctor alongside either Liz Shaw, Joe Grant, or Sarah Jane Smith, like chasing after the big bad of the story, or just the Master causing havoc on Earth. And whilst the Doctor himself was exiled after the War Games, the exile aspect of the Jon Pertwee era was a very brave move and it was made this era very enjoyable. And also the Jon Pertwee era was responsible for making the popular aspects that were introduced in his era like more popular, such as the Master, the Autons, Sontarans, Silurians, Sea Devils unit, and we also got popular companions such as Sarah Jane Smith and Joe Grant and etc. etc. So the Jon Pertwee era was very much Doctor Who does James Bond, a franchise I also really enjoy. Nice cars, Bessie in the Humorbill, nice gadgets, Sonic Screwdriver, villains with ambitious plans for world domination, iconic villains like the Master who also resembled Blofeld himself, especially with the outfit and but minus the cat as well. Attractive women helping out the Doctor, well, except the Doctor doesn't actually sleep with them. Well, plus the third Doctor was being very James Bond like himself because they're both very suave, and I really enjoyed the third Doctor's character development and as it progressed during his era. I liked how, despite his frustrations of his exile situation with him being trapped on Earth, he still decided to protect it even after his exile was lifted. He still worked for UNIT to help them deal with any menaces on Earth. And he gets a very heroic exit at the end. And the Pertwee era, without a doubt, is my favourite era of classic Who, and Jon Pertwee is without a doubt my favourite classic Doctor. And with that, season 11 and the reviews of the Jon Pertwee era are now at an end. Join me next time as I rank all 5 stories of season 11. So thanks for watching this review. Please let me know what you thought of Planet of the Spiders, this review, and the Jon Pertwee era overall. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and you can join my Discord server, which is in the link below. Well, until then, see you later.